This is Steve Downs, the voice of Master Chief, Sierra 117, and you're listening to Podcast Unlocked, the world's #1 Xbox podcast. Now, finish this fight. Master Chief, out.
What's happening, friends? Welcome to Podcast Unlocked. It is IGN's weekly Xbox show here for May 7th as we record this today here in the year 2024. This is episode 644. I'm Ryan McCaffrey, as always, and I'm joined by Stella Chung. How are you?
Good. Excited to, well, not really excited to talk about things, but I'm revved up to talk about it.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Destin Legary, hello, my friend.
Hi, Ryan.
Well, yeah, there's, as you can tell, exuberance is at a bit of a minimum today. These are shows we don't enjoy doing, but this is, we're lucky enough to come here and talk about video games, and this is the bad side of it this week. We're going to talk about the not good Xbox news that you've probably already heard about, and we've got plenty of thoughts here. But first, I did want to share some good news about the coolest things happening this summer. There is going to be fun to be had, I do promise you. We have IGN's big gaming and entertainment event coming up in just a month's time in Los Angeles, June 7th, 8th, and 9th. And interestingly, Phil Spencer will be joining us. And I say that because of we announced this the day before that the not great Xbox news happened. And then the very next day, let's just say that the interview got a little more interesting. I've had a lot of people tweeting at me about this already, but in any case, come hang out with us. I'm going to interview Phil and some other folks from Xbox live on stage. You can come and hang out and be a part of it in LA. IGN Live is the name of the event, June 7th through 9th. Head on over to IGN.com/live. There's going to be all kinds of programming, tons of stuff to do. Just head to that website and learn more. Now, the timing of that is on purpose, in part because the Xbox Showcase is happening on June 9th. We have a confirmed date for that, 10 a.m. Pacific. So the three of us will be live in Los Angeles with all of you who are interested in joining us. And if you can't join us in LA, that's all right. We'll be live streaming on IGN.com and everywhere else that IGN broadcasts, as we usually do. And then Phil will join us after the Xbox Showcase and the redacted direct, which is clearly for Call of Duty. It's just a matter of what that Call of Duty game is called, whether it's Black Ops 5, Black Ops Gulf War, probably Black Ops 5, based on the redacted image and the internet sleuths out there that have been dissecting it. So we'll see what happens at the Xbox Showcase this year. And as always, we will do our annual predictions episode for what we think is going to happen at the Xbox Showcase coming up in, maybe it might even just be a couple weeks away at this point, maybe 2 shows, maybe 3 at the most. We'll figure it out, and we'll have fun on that one. But for now, we pivot to the topic at hand. There's no great way to segue into it. As we mentioned at the top, just a devastating week here for so many people at Xbox. And it's certainly devastating for the Xbox community as well. Certainly nowhere near as devastating as it is for the people actually losing their jobs out of this. But as we sit here as Xbox fans, Xbox customers, it's not great either. Microsoft has closed 3 Bethesda studios and merged another, meaning Arcane Austin, makers of Prey and Redfall, Tango Gameworks, makers of the 2 Evil Within games along with Hi-Fi Rush, and Alpha Dog, studio that did the mobile game Mighty Doom. Those are all getting shut down, and Roundhouse, which has been a support studio, is getting folded into ZeniMax Online, makers of Elder Scrolls Online. I know I'm talking a lot right now, and there's going to be plenty of time to get Destin and Stella's thoughts. I want to just give you the facts here before I turn the floor over to them and we start our discussion on this. Matt Booty, the head of Xbox Game Studios, not promoted there too long ago. It was fairly recent that he got promoted up into that role. He had an internal memo which has made its way out. I want to read you that memo in full just so you have the full context. So in an email sent to staff by Matt Booty, head of Xbox Game Studios, he says, "Today I'm sharing changes we are making to our Bethesda and ZeniMax teams. These changes are grounded in prioritizing high-impact titles and further investing in Bethesda's portfolio of blockbuster games and beloved worlds, which you have nurtured over many decades. To double down on these franchises and invest to build new ones requires us to look across the business to identify the opportunities that are best positioned for success. This reprioritization of titles and resources means a few teams will be realigned to others and that some of our colleagues will be leaving us. Here are the changes going into effect. Arcane Austin. This studio will close, with some members of the team joining other studios to work on projects across Bethesda. Arcane Austin has a history of making impactful and innovative games, and it is a pedigree that everyone should be proud of. Redfall's previous update will be its last as we end all development on the game. The game and its servers will remain online for players to enjoy, and we will provide make-good offers to players who purchased the Hero DLC. Alpha Dog Studios. This studio will also close. We appreciate the team's creativity in bringing Doom to new players. Mighty Doom that's just a little typo there. Mighty Doom will sunset on August 7th, and we will be turning off the ability for players to make any purchases in the game. Tango Gameworks. Tango Gameworks will also close. We are thankful for their contributions to Bethesda and players around the world. Hi-Fi Rush will continue to be available to players on the platforms it is today. Roundhouse Games. The team at Roundhouse Games will be joining the ZeniMax Online Studios. Roundhouse has played a key role in many of our recent game launches, and bringing them into ZOS to work on the Elder Scrolls Online will mean we can do even more to grow the world that millions of players call home. With this consolidation of our Bethesda studio teams, so that we can invest more deeply in our portfolio of games and new IP, a small number of roles across select Bethesda publishing and corporate teams will also be eliminated. Those whose roles will be impacted will be notified today, and we ask that you please treat your departing colleagues with respect and compassion. We will provide our full support to those who are impacted in today's notifications and through their transitions, including severance benefits informed by local laws. These changes, I promise it's almost over, this is long. These changes are not a reflection of the creativity and skill of the talented individuals at these teams or the risks they took to try new things. I acknowledge that these changes are also disruptive to the various support teams across ZeniMax and Bethesda that bring our games to market. We are making these tough decisions to create capacity to increase investment in other parts of our portfolio and focus on our priority games. Bethesda remains one of the key pillars of Xbox with a strong portfolio of amazing games and thriving communities. As we look to the future, there is an impressive lineup of games on the horizon. In 2024 alone, we have Starfield Shattered Space, Fallout 76 Skyline Valley, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, and The Elder Scrolls Online's Golden Road. As we align our plans and resources to best set ourselves up for success in this complex and changing industry, our teams across Arcane Lion, Bethesda Game Studios, id Software, Machine Games, ZeniMax Online Studios, and Bethesda Publishing and corporate teams will be well positioned to build new IP, explore new game concepts, and expand on our existing franchises. Destin, let me go to you first here just for your initial reactions. There is a lot to talk about here, and we will get to all of it.
Hey, we want to allow people to experiment and try new things, but if it doesn't go well, you're closed. Like, the message that this must be sending internally has to be devastating. It's really hard to read as a fan of Xbox, and I've seen a lot of people very upset by this. This like there was already a tumultuous period, and it seemed like good news was starting to come back. Like the Fallout TV show was good, all the Fallout coverage had been positive, and then there's always something that seems to happen with Xbox where it's
They
like
step on the rake, that's my favorite catchphrase with this. They constantly, it's like good thing, momentum, smack, step on the rake.
Exactly. And this is just another example. And I think fans, especially this year, are kind of at a breaking point where they're just like, all right, like I'm done. And this isn't like unique to Xbox, by the way. I do realize Sony laid off a bunch of people this year. There's the Embracer layoffs that have taken place and the restructuring. This is a failure of executive leadership. And Matt Booty says as much, but it's just like something needs to change. And this is just devastating news to hear today.
Stella?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot to say on this, but we'll do it bit by bit. Yeah, this sucks. I mean, it's very confusing. There's not a real clear path in which we can see Xbox's strategy. Like they're at a $21.9 million profit. And no, is it million? Yes, I believe it is.
Probably revenue.
Profit. It's
revenue or profit.
Yeah, so Microsoft posted a 17% increase in revenue and $21.9 billion in profit in the latest financial earnings report. So it's not like they're hurting. And we did see that Jez Corden of Windows Central, he said Hi-Fi Rush, well, he did question about Hi-Fi Rush, if they didn't sell enough because it was on Game Pass, like if that was maybe hurting them. But then Aaron Greenberg was like, no, this was a breakout hit. It hit all of our key measurements and expectations.
That was a tweet from a year ago or a little more, sometime last year.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, so if that's, what does this mean then? So there's just no clear strategy or anything that not even the consumers can see, but now it's very clear that the developers and these studios don't even know, which is like the bigger problem. So it's a little frustrating. It's very frustrating to hear, and it's really disappointing because Hi-Fi Rush also just came out on PS5 and people loved it. So there's a lot more than just Hi-Fi Rush and all these other things that I'm talking about that I want to rant about, but it is infuriating seeing the outpour of tweets today and everyone saying, well, I guess I was part of the percentage of people that got laid off. If you know work, please let me know. And we already know how bad the whole trying to get hired anywhere is just horrible right now.
Yeah.
And to your point, just real quick, to your point, Stella, about the Aaron Greenberg post and about Phil Spencer talking about how important Tango Gameworks is because it was one of their Japan studios.
It's just like only Japanese studio.
Their only Japanese studio. I don't even know how do you trust leadership again? Because they're saying these things and then they're closing these studios internally or externally. There's already a lack of faith in the Xbox brand going into this. And now this happens and all of these old statements are coming up and it's just like, so it's just nonsense. All of it wasn't true. And that's the sentiment I'm seeing online.
Yeah, there was a clip making the rounds. He's even posted how he pronounces it, but Clobril, Destin, do you know that?
Clobril. Yeah, I think you said it right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So he's a very super positive, is always posting very just genuine, enthusiastic things about what's going on with Xbox. He posted a clip today from the Power On documentary from 3 years ago, less than 3 years ago. It's from 2021. I think it came out in later 2021. That was the one that I was in, where there's a section in there that he posted up where it was Sarah Bond and Phil Spencer talking about the Lionhead situation of how they acquired Lionhead. And these are my words. They mismanaged that studio into closure. They tried to turn Fable into a 4v1 multiplayer game. They staffed the studio that way. And when it became clear that that wasn't the right thing to do, suddenly they no longer had a team that could make a proper Fable game, they had this multiplayer team and they shut the whole studio down. And so in this documentary, there's this clip of Sarah and Phil talking about how they wanted to not make that same mistake. So that clip got resurfaced today. And then 1 year ago, almost exactly, it was May 4th, I believe was the exact date. I had posted it on Twitter. It was when Phil went on Kinda Funny right as the Redfall reviews and release was happening, and that famous appearance on Kinda Funny where he went and kind of faced the music. And Phil said, "One thing I won't do is push against creative aspirations of our teams. When a team like Rare wants to do Sea of Thieves, when a team like Obsidian wants to do Grounded, when Tango wants to do Hi-Fi, when everyone thought they were probably doing The Evil Within 3, I want to give the teams the creative platform to go and push their ability, to push their aspirations." So to your point, Destin, yeah, these statements are now being thrown back in their faces, and they should be. And I'm not saying that Phil or Sarah or anybody else is maliciously, that they're evil people doing this. Like, obviously the business equation changed, but that doesn't change the fact that, to your exact point, the trust erodes both internally, crucially internally, on development teams. Now, that's me speculating. I haven't talked to any developers yet at Microsoft to hear from them if they are feeling that way. But I have to imagine there's a very good chance that there's an erosion of trust there. And what you are seeing publicly on the customer side of things from Xbox gamers, the Xbox community, is that erosion of trust when you have these now hypocritical words from the recent past. These are not 10-year-old words here. So it's a really weird and just really terrible situation we find ourselves in. And it's like, Stella, I want to come back to something you said about what's the strategy, because you're not the only one wondering that. Like, Xbox has struggled for a long time to find a proper bearing, like to finally get the ship sailing in the right direction. And it's like, let's get, to get talented teams making great games that they want to make and giving them the resources to do it and getting great content on the platform and making Game Pass an attractive thing that serves gamers and then serves the business interest. But, you look at this and you go, like, I wrote down 5 things. We'll get to those. We'll get to everything Stella and Destin have written down. And one of them was, which you guys have already hit on, is with Tango specifically as a micro, not that as an example. I don't want to minimize it by calling it a micro example, but when you've got Phil Spencer repeatedly on the record, and if you're hearing, that's Daisy chugging water behind me, if you're hearing that, has said repeatedly, like, we really want more Japanese developers on our platform. We want to partner up with more Japanese studios. And they go and close the only Japanese studio they have after they've just made this phenomenal game, 9 out of 10 on IGN. I could look at the Metacritic. I'm sure it's in the mid to high 80s. Just incredibly well-received game. It was, if we're being honest, the release of that game was probably, in hindsight, the high point of the Xbox year last year. And I don't say that with any other judgment on anything else. But in January, at that first developer direct, when this comes out of nowhere and they introduce the game and say it's out right now, and people are downloading it and they start playing it and they find this incredible character rhythm action game, that was such a high point of the year for Xbox. And now this is their fate. Their fate is to be gone. And there were some other quotes, I don't know if you have them, Destin, about like really showing support and saying that, look, we're going to invest in Tank. Like, there are other quotes out there that now look really terrible as today's events, this week's events have transpired. I have so many other notes. I want to go. I've been talking way too much. Stella, you said you've got a bunch. Let's just run through everything here, because this is a big topic. Let's talk through it all here.
Yeah, no. So just full disclosure, the reason why I'm stuttering over things is because I got very little sleep last night. So if my thoughts seem kind of scattered, that's why. First of all, I hate that the closures were announced through an email, that it was going to be through a due to a reprioritization of titles and resources. And that specifically what he said was they're making tough decisions to create capacity to increase investment for other parts of our portfolio and focus on our priority games. And the first question that came up in my head was, okay, but who are these decisions tough for, really? You can say all the things you want. And I mean, it directly contradicts exactly what the studio heads say, right? Let's see. That one quote from Phil Spencer, I forget how long ago. It's been going around now with his little video clip where he said, "You acquire a studio for what they're great at now, and your job is to help them accelerate how they do what they do, not them accelerate what you do." But it's a little hard for them to do what they're good at when they don't have jobs, especially when they didn't have a choice but to work for you. And we do know that with Redfall, there was a lot of miscommunication within the development. I mean, the developers didn't feel confident about the state it was launched in. A lot of people, we know this, that a lot of people who wanted to work at Arcane Austin, they were not aware that this was going to be a multiplayer online game. And everyone there was very well versed in single player story based games. So it was very mishandled. And we know that. And Phil did apologize for that and take responsibility.
Not unlike Lionhead with Fable Legends back in the day, where you've miscast a studio and its talents.
Yeah, and we saw Phil take responsibility, but he's not taking responsibility now since it's actively going to cut into his finances, which is really telling. It really shows the true colors, and it's so disappointing. I mean, Microsoft is valued right now at more than $3 trillion. So it's not like you're hurting. You'll be fine. And in order to get developers to make good games, you have to fail. That's just going to happen, especially with smaller studios. You're not always going to make a hit, right? Things aren't always going to be great. And it just sucks that they're not willing to take that chance. And we've gone from just laying off developers to now just closing down entire studios just because you think your finances are going to take a bigger hit. And it's what happened to really letting people be creative and actually invest in good ideas like they say they are? And it's just so hypocritical. And I'm really upset. I don't understand. Microsoft wanted to help developers achieve their vision with proper funding and backup, but that backup is completely gone now. They just trapdoor, right? They just trapdoored all these studios. And I'm very angry for all the people who got laid off and just don't have their studios anymore.
Imagine you're working on Clockwork Revolution or South of Midnight right now, and how worrying that would have to be launching a new IP, given the change in landscape at the company that you work for. That's got to be very worrying, especially when a lot of those titles aren't seeing mass interest or mass appeal. Matt Booty says, "We are making these tough decisions to create capacity to increase investment in other parts of our portfolio and focus on our priority games." Are these still your priority games? And we saw studio leadership leave Tango Gameworks, and now Gameworks is gone. I saw Simon Carty say something about this, and I share the concern. But basically, studio leadership recently left Ninja Theory, and Hellblade 2 is about to come out. If that's not a smash success, what does that mean for that studio? Mm-hmm. So, if I'm on the outside and I'm oh God, Tango Gameworks had Ghostwire, which was mostly positive, and they had Hi-Fi Rush, which was critically acclaimed, and they're gone. What does that mean if a big investment like Hellblade 2 or one of the other IPs that I mentioned doesn't go the way that they're hoping? It makes it a very difficult work environment, and there's been a lot of studies about how negative things like this are for employees internally at companies. It's very bad.
You both touched on a couple of things that I had in my notes too, and I'll start since you mentioned Hellblade Destin, because I had that came to mind for me too. It's if we look, the odds are that Hellblade 2 is not going to be a huge commercial success.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I say that is not a quality judgment, but you have, it's an art house game. Like I don't think anybody would really dispute that.
It looks amazing.
Yeah. It's when I say commercial, I'm some critically, especially off the first one, like this critically, it has a very, very good chance to be a 9 out of 10 game or even a 10 out of 10 game. But when you look at exactly what you're talking about, Destin, there's been, in my humble opinion, I don't have Aaron Greenberg or anybody's marketing spreadsheets in front of me, but I have seen no marketing for Hellblade 2 for a game, by the way, that's out in 2 weeks. Game's out in 2 weeks. And I'm really excited to play it. We've all been looking forward to this game since the Xbox Series X was announced, because this game was announced at the same time. So the game's out in 2 weeks. They don't seem to be spending anything or spending much to market it. They've already priced it at $50, in part because it's it's a shorter experience, no multiplayer, no live service, and it's digital. They're not even doing a physical release. So those 3 things suggest to me that even if it's a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10, it's probably not gonna sell super well. And I think, and it tells me that Microsoft knows that their expectation is the same. And so I share the same fear. Like if I'm at Ninja Theory and this news broke, today as we record this, and those guys are 8 hours ahead of us on the USA West Coast, I don't know if I'm going to be able to sleep very well tonight when I'm thinking about, oh, geez, we're about to launch our game and all this just happened. It's crazy. And then I wanted to come back to the Tango piece about Shinji Mikami. You mentioned that him as well, Destin. And that I had a similar thought of, so Mikami-san left last year. I think it was sometime last year. And
the studio had left about 3 years ago from Ninja Theory. And the Tango Tango departure was like a year before. Yeah,
it was pretty recent. And because it was well after the launch of Hi-Fi Rush. It just made me wonder, well, could they just not get on track with new studio leadership or a new project or a new vision for whatever the next thing was? Because he was the survival horror guy, and he came there and did Resident. He came there and did The Evil Within, and were they trying to figure out what to do? So that kind of left the studio floating in limbo, and that's like, that just kind of left me. I just wonder. I'm not blaming Mikami at all. Like, to be super clear, I just wonder if his departure impacted the decision to close the studio at all. So that was one thing that I had in my notes, and to sort of come back around to something you were both talking about. If you want to sort of take the 10,000 foot view of this, like just pull the camera way back and let's look at the macro here rather than the micro. For me, we've spent years on this podcast. I've been at IGN a long time, and a lot of those were the dark Xbox One years where there was just not a lot of awesome exclusive first party games to talk about. There wasn't a quantity or a quality. There was neither of those. And for a first party publisher that has been starving for quality exclusive content for years to be shutting down studios, again, from just the 10,000 foot macro view, is just wild. That alone is just wild to me. And I know the business reality is far more complex than that. You can't boil it down to just that, but just from sitting here as, if you're an Xbox fan, you're somebody that's invested in the ecosystem, you'd look at that and go, well, wait a second, haven't you guys spent the last 10 years trying to get more games, and now you're closing down two fairly decorated studios here. Sure, Redfall was not a hit, not a good game, but Prey sure ended up being a pretty darn good game. So yeah, that was one thing that I just couldn't help but shake my head at.
Going to your Hellblade discussion. So Greenberg had tweeted like 4 days ago. Had a great review with the team leading our big global and regional marketing plans to support Senua's Saga Hellblade 2. It all starts next week as we optimize leading up to launch and beyond. So many fun creative plans to name a few: global paid media campaign, cinema launch program, out-of-home advertising, brand partnerships, special activation from Iceland, so much more. Excited to share more and celebrate this immersive and visually stunning masterpiece from the team at Ninja Theory. In the meantime, you can wishlist, pre-order, pre-install on Game Pass, Xbox, and PC and Steam to get ready for the big launch on May 21st. Isn't it a little bit late to be launching that next week when it's launching May 21st? All of that campaigning like 2 weeks before, that just seems really, really poorly done. And also just, oh my God, not everyone has Twitter and can see this, right? But it's so infuriating to see all of these really good games. Like Hellblade, I think a lot of us in the industry know what you mean when you're like, oh, it's not going to be a commercial success. Like we look at things like Call of Duty, we know it's guaranteed to make in money and go way above what they expect, right? Just every year. And no matter how good Hellblade could be, people are always going to be like, well, it's not like this, it's not like that, or they're going to compare it to other things because they don't give it a chance because there's not enough information out about this game. And this is another case of that. I mean, like 2 weeks before it launches, we're finally getting some ad space. Great.
Where is it? I haven't been served an ad for Hellblade 2.
Yeah.
I've seen nothing about it anywhere. There were the previews a few weeks back, and it's just been silence. And then like what happens if this game comes along and it's not a success? Like Ryan, there's already red flags all over it. Like you said, it's very concerning because that studio is one of my favorite studios in the industry. They have made some amazing games during their time, and I just would hate to see anything happen to Ninja Theory or any of the studios that I've mentioned.
Something you both touched on that I had the same thought as well. Coming back to Arcane Austin, yeah, again, Redfall, clearly not it. I maintain that Xbox leadership should have done a better job of seeing that coming, seeing exactly what it was going to be, and recalibrating expectations both internally and externally, doing a better job of that. Instead, we were all led to believe that this was going to be the first $70 game from Xbox Game Studios, big AAA thing, one of the first new things since the Bethesda acquisition, and it fell on its face. But
it was a disaster.
Yeah, it was. But their track record prior to that was awesome. And so I again understand that the business reality is more complicated, but if you're only as good as your last game, to what Stella, you were so brilliantly, perfectly saying earlier about if you want to be creative, you can't be afraid to fail. How does Arcane Austin not merit another chance? And what message, as you've both already touched on, what message does that send to every other team in the now quite large Xbox, Bethesda, Activision, Blizzard, King organization? That if your game's not awesome and not a hit, both, by the way, because, Hi-Fi Rush was awesome and Redfall wasn't, but like if your game is not awesome and a hit, then your chair gets very, very warm. You're on the hot seat. Like that's not a great environment that you want to be creative in, which you've both already touched on.
Yeah, I just don't understand what the point is of putting on this guise that you're building an Xbox ecosystem with all these new acquired studios, setting up the future generation of Xbox and moving forward with, expanding out to different platforms and such, when all you're going to do is slash a ton of the resources and studios you have and make the acquisition seem skewed towards the really big and established studios like Activision Blizzard and Bethesda, which those studios are obviously very talented, but there are other talented studios that aren't going to be putting out blockbuster hits every year, but are still just as valuable. So again, this just goes back to, I do not understand what the Xbox strategy is for the future.
That, and why save this for a few months after the 1,900 layoffs you had at the beginning of the year? Like, this is compounded from what has already transpired with Blizzard canceling games that haven't come out because of the Activision acquisition and the layoffs that took place at 343 and the canceling of the IP that was in development, the new IP that was in development at Blizzard, and now a closure of 3 studios. Like, how many more stories are we going to get out of Microsoft specifically like this? Like, are you done? Should we expect one of these a quarter at this point?
Well, you mentioned quarterly. I have some notes here to try and put this into context. Keyword try. I don't pretend to have the answers, but it's perfectly reasonable, and we're all just being human beings who care about not only the games themselves, but the people that make these games. It's okay to be angry today. It's okay. You should be. But when I sat down to prep the podcast here, I wanted to try and incorporate some element of, okay, why? What is the real reason here? So I went back and looked at the last 2 quarterly numbers. Now, I don't pretend to be an expert business analyst by any stretch, but and I know, Stella, you mentioned $3 trillion company. Unfortunately, and I'm not saying it's right, I'm not defending it, we live in a world where that alone is not enough.
Line must go up.
Right. Yes, exactly right. So I think, because I'm also seeing a lot of understandable anger towards Phil, and like, well, so I started thinking about, okay, well, how long is Phil's leash? Like, at what point would, and I'm not advocating for or against here. I'm just trying to think it through. Like, at what point might Satya Nadella go, maybe I'd want to make a change in leadership here? And the thing is, if you look over the past, so Phil's been in the job for 10 years now. He's been running the show for a full decade. Through, he took over the Titanic. If what's his face, Golden Parachute guy, Don Matrick, had rammed the sterling, pristine Xbox 360 vessel into a giant iceberg, and it was not looking good. So Phil he inherited a bad situation, and the numbers had all, like, as far as the bottom line, which again I'm not saying should be the be all end all, but basically is in modern corporate America. The bottom line had been pretty good for quite a while. Game Pass subscriptions were just continually going up. Revenues were all looking good. But taking a look at the last 2 things, and this ties into your point about, is this going to happen every quarter? And sure as hell hope the answer is no. But here is the recap that IGN wrote up from the most recent quarterly earnings report, which was just a couple weeks ago. So, for the 3rd quarter of fiscal 2024, which their quarters are weird for some reason, that we're talking about the first calendar quarter of this year, January through the end of March. For the 3rd quarter of Microsoft's fiscal 2024, Microsoft reported gaming revenue up 51% year over year. or $1.8 billion, to a total of $5.45 billion. It's a record Q3 for the segment, but it comes with a caveat. 55 points of that net impact were from the Activision Blizzard acquisition, meaning that Xbox content and services revenue not related to Activision Blizzard was actually down 4% year over year. We saw a similar situation last quarter too, and we'll almost certainly see it again in the next two. Xbox content and services revenue is in a similar boat. It's up 62% year over year, but with 61 points of net impact from Activision Blizzard, meaning it's only up 1%. And hardware revenue, which wasn't touched by the acquisition, is down 31% due to fewer consoles sold. In the earnings call, Xbox projected a very similar quarter ahead, meaning the one we're in now, with gaming sales growth in the low to mid 40s for Q4, again, this quarter, their Q4, with around 50 points of net impact from Activision Blizzard. Similarly, Xbox content and services growth is expected to be in the high 50s, with around 60 points of net impact from Activision Blizzard, and hardware is once again expected to decline year over year. So in other words, it seems like when it comes to the corporate multi-billion-dollar bottom line, stormy seas are ahead. I'm not saying the ship's going. I'm just saying it does. They're forecasting that it's not all rainbows and sunshine here at the moment. So that may be a huge component of why this is happening.
Yeah, if you take out the Activision Blizzard numbers, I think some analysts were saying it's a net loss of 5% for the gaming division.
Yeah.
But with the numbers, it looks rosier because they're establishing a new baseline with Activision Blizzard on the team. The why about all of it, though, is concerning because one thing Microsoft seems to have failed to do is find a new game that they have created using one of their studios that captures the zeitgeist. All the Fallout games that are popping off right now, those were all made by Bethesda before they were under Microsoft. Starfield has done okay. I played the new expansion on Steam. I was pretty mad about it at first. The new update, the beta version, is available on Steam now. It's an improvement, but is that going to move the needle for Starfield? Is Shattered Space? We don't know, right? Has Starfield blown everybody away and sold well enough for Microsoft? I'm sure it's sold okay, but I'm sure it's not Elder Scrolls or Fallout numbers. So the question remains about all these new IPs. Are any of them going to capture the numbers that are good enough to make line go up? Because we know Redfall didn't do it, and Redfall was marketed like it was going to be this awesome co-op experience, and a lot of people bought into the hype, myself included, and were astronomically let down. So Microsoft and the Xbox gaming division, they need to start putting out awesome games, period. And that's been the feedback that they've had for years. And by awesome games, Hi-Fi Rush was awesome, but it doesn't capture the zeitgeist, the whole gamer sphere. They need big games. They need the next Minecraft, right?
Well,
that they made, and they're just failing repeatedly to capture that, even with their own franchises like Halo, which I love, but it's not. It hasn't shown mass appeal.
True, and yeah, to that, I'm glad you brought that up, Destin, because the Matt Booty words about reinvesting in. I've got it written exactly here somewhere. I mean, I read you the whole thing. I guess I can paraphrase, and you know what I'm talking about.
We are making these tough decisions to create capacity to increase investment in other parts of our portfolio and focus on our priority games.
Yes, thank you. Exactly. So does that mean that some studios are going to have to, like, is Todd Howard going to be told, hey man, we need Elder Scrolls 6. We're willing to throw more resources at you, but you got to turn this thing around quicker because we need that mega blockbuster game. We need that zeitgeist game. Like, is that going to be part of this where the developers of those bigger IP, those bigger franchises that have the potential to really move the needle, are those going to face more pressure now to get done and to be awesome, which we all know that's not a recipe to make them good. It's not to put pressure on the developers is not the way to make them better. So
fear motivation doesn't work, Ryan? What?
Well, yeah, exactly that. And it also, like, does that mean, even though Matt Booty did specifically say new IP, I certainly, coming out of his giant memo there, I'm not coming out of reading that expecting there to be any more hi-fi rushes or any, just cool incubated ideas. Like,
they canceled Blizzard's new IP.
The survival game. Yeah.
The survival game. Now, the original Overwatch was a big hit, and they just canceled the next thing that Blizzard was working on. So, like, even that's not good enough. And I highly doubt that survival game was a hi-fi rush. So what, again, it comes back to Stella's question. What's the play here? What are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, in order for you to help your studio succeed, like you say you want them to, you got to give them a guideline, and it seems like they're just not. So if the consumers are getting just as little information, that's really messed up. And I don't know what constitutes as these priority games, right? Like, can we just get an idea? I think at this point, we deserve a little bit of transparency, if not for the developers, at least. Maybe just a hint for people too, right? Because I feel like you said this at the top of the show, and it's so funny because I was like, man, ever since I got on the show, I have heard Ryan say that Xbox has just been stepping on a rake like every few months. And it's kind of crazy to me that it just constantly comes back to that phrase. And I'm like, hey man, how many times do we have to go through this, And I genuinely don't understand. Like, any sort of transparency here would be great.
PlayStation does a lot of stuff I don't like, but they make a lot of really great games that capture everybody's interest and sell well, right? And Microsoft needs that desperately. They need to figure out what those priority games are, and maybe it's what he listed for Bethesda, Fallout 76, Starfield, and the others that were listed on his email. But like, yeah, I don't know.
I mean, what's interesting also is that just because you have a really good, like, Activision Blizzard could put out a really bad game too, right? So it's not like they're faultless. So I just want to know what is going on. I want to know what the thought process is, because right now it seems like there's no thought process at all.
It's probably obvious. Didn't make enough money, close the studios. And like, yes, we should ask the question because there are compounding factors to that. Sorry to interrupt you, Ryan.
No,
but like,
please.
There's the current nature of money and just how much our money is worth around the world. We were just talking about that in a meeting, and how inflation's out of hand. So buying stuff right now is more expensive to do, especially if you're borrowing money. And that all should be considered. But Stella, you said they posted like 20 something $million in profit.
Mm-hmm.
Profit. Billion?
Hold on. I read you the numbers earlier. Yeah, it was
Well, they posted a profit in one of the most difficult years, but it wasn't enough. It's concerning.
Yeah. And it's the rake thing is, it would be hilarious if it weren't so sad, where the Fallout TV show was this absolute zeitgeist moment, home run for, the Fallout games were every single one of them were lifted up. They were all being played as much as ever, in some cases more than ever. And they announced the showcase, and they're gonna, okay, well, what are we gonna see there? And Hellblade 2 is about to launch, and it's just like, boom, here we go again. Now it's like it's one step forward, 2 or 3 steps back, constantly. The messaging, I know I've done the messaging rant before. I would shit can everybody that's involved in messaging. They need a new strategy with regard to messaging the strategy, messaging what's cool about Xbox, why you should invest in it as a gamer, as a consumer. I mean, I don't know where to go from here. I mean, go ahead, Destin, please.
They're clearly struggling with that also. They saw a 30% hardware decline, and granted, others are seeing hardware sales declines, like Nintendo also struggled with that, but 30%, and they're like, oh yeah, and expect it again next quarter. Right. It's just like they're clearly struggling with the messaging, as you said.
The Switch is declining because everybody has one, and it's like the second best-selling console of all time, and everybody's just waiting for the new one. There's nobody left to buy a Switch. The Series X just came out.
Exactly. And when all the messaging, like when you do analytical tests on the console, and repeatedly the competing platform is running games better than your platform that you say is the most powerful Xbox ever made, it's just like, I know that like the high end gamer is like 5% of the market, but word of mouth has power, and eventually that starts bleeding out that like it's not cool to like the Xbox, anymore. And like that kind of feels like where it's at the moment. Like if I ask a random person who's like, yeah, I play games, I really want to get a PS5, is what you usually hear, right? You don't hear a lot of people like hyped to get an Xbox. And that's a big problem that Microsoft and the gaming division are going to need to figure out. And Phil saying stuff like, yeah, well, we lost the console war anyway, so whatever. Like it's like none of it is particularly inspiring as a fan or as a casual viewer into the gaming sphere.
I mean, the thing is, like, the number, the data shows that Phil and the Xbox crew it's more likely that they're right than they're wrong about the future of gaming being on every device, rather than a single, I'm a console fanboy, that everything has got to be just on my platform. Like Generation Alpha, they don't care. They do not care about whether it's Fortnite or whatever. Like they just want to play they want to play the game they like on whatever device is closest to them, whether that's their phone, whether that's a Switch, whether that's a PC, whether that's a console. And so, like, that strategy may prove to be the winning one in the end and be effective. But to your exact point, Destin, like, there's still that lack of like that big home run game to get everybody fired up about the platform. Like on the PlayStation side, I wouldn't even say it's one game, but they've well earned a reputation for, if you buy a PlayStation, you're going to get really cool games on it because they've consistently delivered. And
they're expanding that ecosystem of BPC. There was the Helldivers controversy.
Yeah, they screwed that up. But
well, they did for a few days, and then they backed down. They said, hey, we're still figuring out how to do PC stuff, so we're not going to require it in this instance. Like, I know it's PR marketing, and they still have to restore access to the 177 countries the game was removed from on Steam. But long story short, that is like nothing compared to what it feels like today is for Microsoft. Like it's pretty crazy just to see the disparity between the two. And I said this at some point, I don't remember where, but this is supposed to be PlayStation's off year, and they're winning so freaking hard, it's insane. Like Helldivers 2 is a smash hit of proportion. Final Fantasy, another huge win for PlayStation. And it's just like, this is supposed to be Xbox's year, and it's just been crickets. Besides Pal World at the beginning of the year, which, you know, it tapered down. It's still popular, but it's
huge game. Give it its due. I mean,
I'm just saying, like, but PlayStation has had continual releases since that point on their off year, and we're waiting for Hellblade, and there's no marketing for it beyond some positive previews that came out a few weeks ago. You know, and they're saying that game is like 6-7 hours, you know, which is fine or whatever, but it's just like people are going to eat that up, and then they're just waiting again for indie or whatever the next big one happens to be.
Yeah, I was debating. I mean, I'll just go through this real quick because you kind of segued perfectly into it. There was The Verge had a report this week, and The Verge is a credible source, so I'm willing to entertain this here. The Verge is reporting that basically they've had the targeted release windows for the rest of the year for Microsoft revealed to them. So if their report is accurate, and to me this all sounds pretty reasonable. If this is accurate, the back half of the year, the fall particularly, looks pretty good. That's if you want some good news coming out of this podcast. So The Verge reported that Bethesda is currently targeting a September release for the Starfield expansion, Shattered Space. Elsewhere, Activision, they claim, plans to release the next Call of Duty, probably Black Ops 5, in late October, which we would have that's just the normal time for that anyway. The same report claims that Obsidian's Avowed and Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 follow in November, with Machine Games' hotly anticipated Indiana Jones and the Great Circle to launch in December. Now, that doesn't include Hellblade 2 in 2 weeks, as we've been talking about. Stalker 2, a third-party exclusive that looks phenomenal. That's in early September. And then, PC only, admittedly not the biggest game, but you've got Ara History Untold, also slated for the fall, with at least one wild card still floating out there as far as a really exciting-looking exclusive, and that's Replaced, that pixel art kind of Blade Runner action-adventure platformer that we've seen a couple times. That's another Ukrainian developer that's been, of course, having to deal with a lot of real shit, to just put it mildly, as they try to work on their game and get it done. So, you know, the rest of the year, the back half of the year, could look real good, is the good news, Destin. Whereas Sony's had these couple of third-party wins early on, but it gets kind of quiet for them after. But it's this, I can't help but even look at this and go, all right, well, that looks like some nice momentum, but are they going to step on another rake? Is something going to get in the way of that somehow?
I'm wondering which of those are going to get delayed, or which don't actually hit that window. What does the cadence look like the following year? Why are they all hitting in the same 4 months? Like, why isn't this spread out a little bit more throughout the year? And like,
beggars can't be choosers at this point. We've been waiting for first.
They're overcrowding. They're overcrowding their own releases at that point.
I don't know. I mean, I'll argue with you on that. I mean, Ubisoft always dumps multiple huge games
for the holiday rush
in Q4, and they seem to do pretty well. I'm not going to tell Microsoft to hold off on some of this stuff. Like, give me when was the last time, Destin, that we had, let's say, 4 straight months, like we're talking about here, September, October, November, December? When was the last time we had like really notable, awesome, exclusive Xbox games in 4 straight months?
No, I absolutely agree with you.
So let's take it. Let's take it.
It's nice. Let's get that cadence and have it keep going, because it does feel like when Halo Infinite and Forza Horizon 5 came out, and it felt like they were finally getting their momentum. And I know that was just 2 titles, but this is also not confirmed, right? This is what The Verge is reporting.
That too. That was that very awesome fall of 2021 that you're talking about, that when we all thought the ship was finally turning around.
And what do we have before September? So we have Hellblade 2, great.
Yep.
And then
and then nothing big, but a bunch of cool stuff in the summer that we saw on that ID at Xbox showcase that we talked about, that we did the show on last week.
That's true.
But admittedly, nothing big, right? Okay, there is a difference, as you wisely pointed out. You know, there is a difference between,
Yeah, the conversation today is about the big games, though.
Yes.
Because that is what's being impacted today, is the Bethesda studios and how they're restructuring the whole studio and getting rid of 4 of them, one of which is being folded into ZeniMax Online to help with Elder Scrolls Online, I believe, and whatever else they're working on. So yeah, I don't know, man. It's just really hard for me to be hype or see positivity today with relation to this, because it feels like there's a whole lot of lies from like a year ago that are coming to the forefront, or at least misleading statements that just ring hollow and really, really sting after a year of just saying, well, just wait, it's coming.
Yeah, I think somewhat in their defense, I don't think they were necessarily intentional lies, but I think what you said, they were true at the time. I think what you said about them ringing hollow now is super fair. They absolutely ring hollow today.
Hi-Fi Rush did great. It met all our sales target. We're just going to close the studio.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, it's like, what? Like, those two things don't mesh together. We want a Japanese studio. All right, you got one. Oh, it's closed. It's like, what?
Yeah,
we want to invest on our... Sorry, Stella, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to... I feel like with all of this pressure on these now priority games, which we still don't know which ones are technically the priority games, there's just going to be a lot more pressure and a lot more toxicity if they aren't as good as people want them to be or expect them to be, right? So it just sucks for everyone else in that Xbox ecosystem because of this statement. I mean, it's like, it's not their fault. And it's different pressure from all sorts of perspectives. And it's just really awful. And I don't know how they come back from this.
Even worse, Stella, apathy. Oh, another Xbox game that wasn't good. Well, go back to doing whatever. Like that's the sentiment.
Yeah, that can't be what's expected. And that's kind of what it is now. But now it's like, oh, we got shut down for this, or we might get shut down because of it. That's so much pressure. That's not okay.
It's even internal conflict pressure too, because it's like, oh, well, you close those 3 studios, and then like there's more pressure on the games that are new IP. That sucks. Like there's just nothing that feels good about this.
Yeah.
Stella, the big games you were talking about and wondering about. Well, here's what's left at Bethesda, because for now, everything we're talking about has affected Bethesda. Now, but we're all absolutely right that if I'm at Ninja Theory, like we were talking about, or if I'm at Double Fine, I'm like a little concerned about the security about my future job security. But as far as Bethesda itself goes, we have Elder Scrolls, Fallout, both of which are controlled by one team, by Todd Howard, who has to date expressed an interest in keeping control of those for himself and his team, and not wanting to say partner up with an Obsidian to do a Fallout, New Vegas 2 kind of deal. Does that change moving forward? Maybe. But my point there is Fallout's way the hell out there before we see another one. Elder Scrolls, we already know. They're in early production now. It's going to be a while on that. Doom, which I think I've said this at least the last year's Xbox showcase, maybe even 2 in a row, but I have to say it again. If the next Doom, which if that leak from the FTC case is still accurate, it's what appears to be a prequel based on the name of it called Doom Year Zero. If that is not announced at next month's Xbox showcase, I'll be quite shocked because we're now 4 years past when Doom Eternal shipped. So it seems like high time for id Software to have something ready to show and maybe even about ready to go. So Elder Scrolls, Fallout, Doom, and then Machine Games currently at work on Indiana Jones, but that's a license deal with Disney. Is Microsoft going to want to stay in a licensed business where they're having to split revenue and profits with Disney when clearly margins are tight enough that they're closing studios? So, I guess I would think unless Indiana Jones sells huge, it's probably going to be a one and done game. Now, I'm not worried about Machine Games, but will they go back to Wolfenstein after this? Will they go to Quake maybe? They've had this tight relationship with id and working on id's IPs, but that's really the list right now. Because Elder Scrolls also includes ESO. So Elder Scrolls, meaning ESO and Elder Scrolls 6, Fallout, the way down the road, Fallout 5, the next Doom, which should be the soon, and then Indie and or Wolfenstein and or Quake, which is the other, of course, big property that id owns. So that's the list for Bethesda right now. So as far as I can see it.
Yeah, I want to see Xbox win. I want to see them posting W's, and it's another rake in the shape of an L again. It's just like Halo Infinite says it's going to be a launch game, then they delay it, then it comes out, it doesn't capture the zeitgeist the way that they hoped, and that's like their flagship franchise, right? And we can just repeatedly point to these times where Xbox has done that over and over again. And sure, Ryan, you're right. It is about the ecosystem going forward. We talked to analysts in a piece where that's clearly the change in strategy that we're seeing at PlayStation. We're seeing that at Xbox. But you know what you need in order to get people to play in your ecosystem? Great games. And Xbox needs to do that more important than ever this year. That holiday slate that you outlined are wins.
Yeah. And I'm optimistic about all of them, to be clear. Everything I've seen from all of those games has me extremely optimistic. That's the good news. I guess I haven't seen anything from Black Ops, from the new Call of Duty, but it's Treyarch who has a pretty good track record, and they've had an extra year than they normally have. And it's a mainline Black Ops game. So, the last couple, Infinity Ward and Sledgehammer have kind of not been great, but optimistic about Call of Duty, optimistic about the Starfield expansion, including that'll roll in the great new updates that you talked about, Destin. Very optimistic about Stalker 2. Optimistic about Replaced if that ends up landing. It's a smaller digital title, I understand. It's not like one of those needle movers we're talking about. But then Flight Sim it's kind of been one of those games that always sells well, just not necessarily to core gamers, but it's always found an audience. The last one was a 10 out of 10 game.
Flight Sim's fantastic.
Yeah. And what was the other November one? Flight Sim and
Indie.
Oh, Avowed. Right. There's definitely we've liked a lot of what we've seen from Avowed. Obsidian has a great track record, and then Indiana Jones. Machine Games has never missed. So, there's plenty of reason to be optimistic about that fall slate, at least, Destin.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
But you're right; they need it. They need all those to hit. So we've got just a couple minutes left. I think we can. There's really this episode is what it is, right? It's I tell you, being the guy in charge, being Phil Spencer, I'm sure it pays exceptionally well. And, but this is, I'm sure he takes no pleasure in these, days like today. But the other part of having that job is you have to be the bad guy. And again, not excusing it at all. Like all all the negativity directed towards Phil he's got to just take that. And we're pretty far away. Remember the "in Phil we trust" days? It's a while ago now. It's to your point, Destin, about kind of rebuilding the trust with the community, and that's going to be a tall order for Phil. And hopefully, this slate of games in the fall will help do it. But in the meantime, it's we mourn three studio closures here, and the fourth being rolled into another one.
It's a very foggy road to victory based off of the last few headlines that we've gotten from Microsoft, from the 1,900 layoffs just a few months ago to canceling BlizzCon and stopping IPs from the Activision Blizzard line, to what we have today with Bethesda and the closure of Tango Gameworks is by far the most baffling one. They made a great game and they're a renowned studio. They made a multi-platform IP with Ghostwire Tokyo that was well regarded also. They filled the goal of getting into Japan. And I feel like I've said all this before, but it makes so little sense on that one. How does that not check a box for them? I just don't get it.
That's definitely I agree. The Tango piece is the one that makes the least amount of sense out of a very confusing, terrible day. That is the one that makes the least amount of sense.
Yeah, I do wonder, what do you think about community sentiment? Do you think like the hardcore fans are going to be feeling this one for a while? Or I've seen sort of both. It seems like 50-50. A lot of people seem kind of done. And a lot of people are like, no, like it's the financial situation the world's in right now and everybody's doing layoffs. And I'm just kind of like, but like, come on. At what point?
Phil seems to be doing all right, though. I mean, the heads seem to be doing okay, you know? So I think that's what people are looking at. It's like, why is it that it's the studios, it's the smaller people who have to pay for mistakes that, you know, overall execs have made versus... Yeah, so I think they will be holding on to this for a while for whatever reasons that they may have. And maybe different. Maybe they were fans of the studios. Maybe they just don't agree with the sentiment that Xbox has put out. Because again, yes, messaging is terrible. I don't like the way that they've come to address this. And they have not come forward to clarify as of right now. So I think people are going to be looking at it for a while. Like hardcore fans and casual fans. Because it's just, I mean, this shook the industry today.
Yeah, so many developers took to social media, both developers that work for Microsoft and ones that don't. Many. Wait, there's an article on IGN about it. If you'd like to go read some of them, that we've kind of collected a bunch. In fact, maybe I'll try to pull that up as we're talking here.
Well, Ding over at Arcane also said
the head of the Marvel Blade project.
Yeah, permission to be human for a second, but basically TLDR, it's a failure of executive leadership. It's not on the employees. And like Matt Booty clarified that as like a nice thing, but it's like, yeah, nobody blames the studios. They blame leadership because leaders are the ones that are letting games like Redfall be released. Like Redfall was so bad, it resulted in the closure of the studio. Like it was such a bad bet. And who paid the price? The people who were told to do that project, not the, yeah. That's the frustrating bit.
A sentiment or I don't know if you want to call it an analogy, but something I saw brought up in a number of times in reaction to this today. And it's fair. I mean, it's not apples to apples. Sports isn't corporate America, but the sort of the comparison was in sports, if the organization continues to fail, it's the management that gets the axe, not the players. But in corporate world, that's not how it goes. And that's another thing I saw brought up, which is also perfectly fair to bring up. Whether it would have changed the equation fundamentally here, I don't know, but it certainly would have it's certainly a noble thing, was people were pointing back to Iwata-san, the sadly now deceased former head of Nintendo, who once, rather than make layoffs, just he cut his own salary so that wouldn't have to happen. And that's
even EA did that
yeah
recently.
Yeah, I'm still trying to find the roundup thing that we did with a bunch of developer quotes in it. Real quick, I do have Shinji Mikami. We were talking about him as the founder of Tango Gameworks. He had left last year. 3-word tweet today. He said, "Tango closed, sad," which, it's what else are you going to say? I don't blame him for having nothing more than that to say.
I mean, it's about what Microsoft gave us about the whole layoffs today. So, I mean, it seems about on par with the messaging.
Oh, here we go. I found it. Shock and anger as Xbox shut down. Let's see. Is this the community one or is this the developer one? Oh yeah. So this has the Dinga Bakaba quote in it that you just gave, Destin. So thank you for that. Let's see here. Is there any other good ones?
Well, I do know that Adam Boyes posted, Microsoft posted a 17% increase in revenue to $61.9 billion with $21.9 billion in profits, up 20% in earnings. That's from Adam Boyes.
Yep.
And that's why it just makes no sense. And then the one from Mike Ibarra, which to me was pretty tone deaf today, was like, I see a lot of shots at Phil over today's Xbox announcements. I get it, but knowing him as a human, I know this hurts him as much as anyone else. Like, look, I'm sure Phil is a super nice guy.
It's not like Phil's sitting there like twiddling it like Mr. Burns. Like
nobody thinks that.
No one, we know that. We're not stupid. But it's the messaging. It's the fact that this is still over.
He's the leader.
Yes,
the buck stops with him. Literally the buck.
Sebastian Mitten, co-creative director at Arcane Lion, so still around, called the closures, quote, a very, very bad wake-up call, saying, a thought for our brothers and sisters in Texas, Canada, and Japan who are going through a very difficult time. Our hearts go out to all of you in this terrible ordeal. Yeah. That's most of it here. It's all terrible.
There's Phil Spencer, the human being, which we all can differentiate from Phil Spencer, the executive, who just closed 4 studios and fired 1,900 people this year. Really? Like, you need to tell us to be nicer to Phil? Like, come on,
he's fine. No, I'm sure he'll wipe away his tears with his dollars. It'll be fine.
Sorry.
It's well said, Des, because it's like just even on my own little, Phil Spencer and I have had professional differences lots of times over the years, but personally we can still, talk to each other. And that's exactly it. It's like, nobody's saying that Phil's up there, just showering himself in gold coins in a tower. But you're right. It's the fault. He has to own it, and that's the job, right? That's the job, and that's what's he has to deal with now. And he's got the morale of a very, very increasingly large organization that's hanging. That I don't want to say hanging by a thread because I don't work there. I can't say that. I don't actually know how the morale is across the business, but he's got to manage whatever impact this had on morale on the entire organization. I think it's fair to phrase it that way.
Yeah, if you want to spread out the shots, it should go to all of leadership. Satya, Bill, who else was on the list? Matt and Sarah Bond are on the list
Tim
too.
Stewart, the CFO.
Tim Stewart.
Yeah, so that was another thing I saw tossed around today too. And again, I don't know. It's like people that were, I think, kind of trying to maybe either give Phil the benefit of the doubt, or defend him, saying, "Well, it's probably the CFO Tim Stewart just getting in the way of Phil's creative vision." And like, well, maybe, but Phil's still the head of Xbox. It's still, as you said, Destin, the buck still stops with him. at the
he
end.
still
of
has
the
to
day.
make all these decisions and sign off on it. So
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. We got to get the hell out of here because there's nothing left to say. We've said it all. We've said all we can say to this whole thing.
Not a great day.
no.
It's I genuinely try to make this podcast fair, but also enthusiastic whenever possible because there's so much negativity online. If you just go try to talk about video games on the internet, you will face absurd amounts of negativity no matter what it is you're interested in. And I've always tried to make Unlocked not be that because when you're hanging out with your friends and talking about video games, it's not negative. And that's what I've wanted to do with this podcast. And I'm sure I don't always succeed there. Today, there's not even an attempt to be, it can't be that. But hopefully we were fair. Whether, I don't know if Phil will listen to this one or not, but we said what we said, and our hearts go out to everybody affected by this at various Bethesda studios, and hopefully they'll find a really rewarding next chapter quickly, and maybe it'll turn out well for them. And as a side bonus, maybe even for us, if we get some new independent studios that could spring out of this, and we get some cool new games with cool new ideas in them. But for the meantime, hopefully Microsoft is treating these folks with the care and respect that they deserve in terms of an adequate severance and helping them stay on their feet and get to the next chapter of their professional lives. So
Xbox has to start posting W's.
Yeah.
No, this is insane. It's May.
Hellblade 2 is in 2 weeks as we record this. Hopefully we'll be talking about a 10 out of 10 video game or 9 out of 10 video game in 2 episodes from now. But for now, that's all we got. Destin, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, I got nothing today. I'm excited about Hellblade 2. There. Playing Gray Zone right now. Our guide is great. So check that out.
All right.
I guess I covered the latest Apex update, so that's the latest thing. And I'm covering I have one more piece on Fallout New Vegas and, getting into it in this good year of 2024. So that's what I got.
Sounds good. You can yell at me on Twitter, although I'd really rather you didn't. DMC_Ryan is my handle there. And that'll do it. We'll be back with more Podcast Unlocked next week. We'll see you then.